Good morning, everyone. It's Sunday, March 17th. It's St. Patrick's Day, and it's time to go on the record. Congressman Joseph Kennedy III, front and center on Capitol Hill right now, his growing clout with the Democratic House.
Will new progressive energy in the party pull the Democrats too far to the left in 2020?
Is he the man for the middle? Beto O'Rourke joins the race for president. Can this former punk rocker rock the vote? Let's go on the record.
From WCVB Channel 5, the inside word from Washington to Beacon Hill. Today's newsmakers are going on the record.
Very good morning to everyone. I'm Ed Harding, along with News Center 5's political reporter Janet Wu. Thank you for joining us. And this morning, we welcome Representative Joseph Kennedy III to OTR. We're calling you Joseph. You know, you're Joseph.
Don't work. Don't work.
Congressman Kennedy is a Democrat. He represents the state's 4th district and has done so since 2013. He is a member of the House Committee on Energy and Commerce, and he has degrees from Stanford and Harvard. And since this is, of course, St. Patrick's Day, and I guess we're both got a little Irish blood flowing through there, but thought we'd wear the green.
There's
right?
one that's missing at this table.
That's all right. No, that's not
obvious.
missing. I'm just saying.
Okay, thank you for being here, Congressman. Let's start with President Trump's promised override of the bill to bar the use of emergency declaration to fund his wall. What's the fallout from all of this politically for both him as well as for Democrats?
Look, I think it's a terrible idea. And you saw a bipartisan rejection, and a strong bipartisan rejection of that plan. One, because it is an inappropriate use of money. Two, it is a extremely dangerous precedent for any president to set. Now, I say that not just because I don't think this is the right policy decision. I say that because our Constitution actually sets up a balance of power between the House of Representatives and the Senate, Congress, versus the executive branch. And if President Trump is going to blow a hole through that balance and try to assert an emergency over what I think by any stretch of the imagination, given a whole wide variety of factors, if this is a national emergency that we're seeing on our border, then there's an emergency on gun violence, there's an emergency on violence in our schools, there's an emergency on climate change, there's an emergency out there for an awful lot of other issues that are core to a democratic message and a democratic reality that I don't think conservatives really want to say, hey, if you can do this for a border wall, then you're opening up the door for all of these other things. So I think it's a bad move on a number of different levels.
You seem to be saying that you believe that the courts will back up the bill as opposed to backing up the president if it gets there.
So I don't know, and I think that this is part of the challenge. I hope the courts do, but this also hasn't been wholly tested, at least from my understanding. The law as contemplated gives the president fairly wide deference in emergencies. And so there hasn't been a recent adjudication as to whether the courts what the standard is, and whether the courts are really going to inject themselves into a discussion as to what is an emergency and what is not. The existing legal framework there gave the president a fair amount of discretion on the idea that the president would use that discretion judiciously and with restraint, so that you weren't actually doing this for political purposes. You were doing it to respond to an emergency. That's not what this is.
But here's reality, too. The numbers were certainly enough to defeat the bill and send it to the president, but the president will exercise his right to veto it, but it won't get overturned. So there aren't enough numbers to turn it back.
Right. So one, we'll see. Given the numbers of that first vote, there aren't. But it was the first time the president's had to veto anything. There was a strong rejection in a Republican-dominated Senate that this was a problem. And sign of the times, you had a number of Republican senators that spoke out about this recently that decided when the vote came, they turned around and flipped their vote, including one, by the way, that decided to pen an op-ed saying what a bad idea this was, that decided to flip his vote 10 days later.
I want to move on to item number 2, which is the shooting in New Zealand. And as we are taping this program right now, we're still learning more about the deadly terror attack in New Zealand. Dozens of people killed in a deadly shooting at 2 separate mosques that were filled with worshipers attending Friday prayers. The gunman, a self-described racist. Forgive the sophomoric nature of the question, but what's your reaction to this act of hate?
Look, it's tragic. It's horrifying. I send my thoughts and prayers, and I think of everybody with the people of New Zealand, with the Muslim community around the world, and with everybody around the world that rejects this type of violence. And again, early reports of this that have come in have indicated that this is in part motivated by a political discourse here in the United States and some of the divisive debates we were having here. And I think it is a reminder for anybody in elective office, any civic leader, that words matter and that the nature of a debate matters. And look, democracy is built on debate, it is built on disagreement, it is built on discussion. But it isn't built on hate, and that there is a way, I would hope that this would be a reminder for all of us, that there's a way to debate these ideas without inciting the type of violence that, that I think we've seen tragically occur in our shores and now well beyond them.
I think we'll be learning more about that as the days and weeks go by. Let's get back here in the United States. The latest college admissions scandal has riled parents throughout the country, if you've ever sent your child to college or you're planning to. And especially now with the acceptance letters are going out, is this something where Congress, do you think, needs to step in, or do you leave it in the hands of the judicial system?
Look, I think first, we have to have a much better understanding as to what exactly happened, how, if there are other concerns that this is happening in other circumstances. So college admissions, one, perfectly reasonable to assume that if it's happening in college, that this is not the only episode, or that it's not happening for competitive high schools as well. And so I think the first step on this would be for Congress to start to gather some additional information and conduct oversight, and then see what, if any, steps Congress should initially take. I noticed, Janet, friend, it's been widely reported from the indictments that the schools themselves were not prosecuted, which is and were not named as institutions. So that, on the one hand, is a good thing. On the other hand, it clearly created, as they've said, a side door to admissions process, which part of the core of our education system, public or private, at higher levels of higher education, is that there's supposed to be some semblance of a meritocracy still to get there, and we want to make sure that that remains.
Is there a message, though, to wealthy people or people in power or people in politics? Is there a strong, clear message here?
I think there needs to be a stronger, clearer message here that that while schools are going to be able to identify recruits to play sports or to fill some aspects of the class that they want, and I think there should be some discretion for them to do that. This does not mean that wealthy people or people of influence should be able to buy their way into admission.
We've been talking a lot in the news about the Trump investigations. We've been talking a lot about the border wall.
Which one?
Sort of, well, exactly.
That's why she said investigations.
There was an S there at the end.
Yeah.
But sort of lost in the conversation, I think, is something that we did talk about a little bit earlier, which has to do with the Dreamers. Their status is even more precarious today than ever before. Where do things stand specifically right now, and what's being done?
So this is a central core of a Democratic policy platform. This is one of the reasons why I think so many of us were really excited to be able to win the majority back. To know that, Janet, since I got to Congress back in 2013, that we have been in the minority in the House of Representatives, that early in 2013, there was an opportunity to actually pass a bipartisan comprehensive immigration reform bill. Then President Obama was for it. We had a veto-proof majority for it in the United States Senate. Speaker Boehner, Republican Speaker, wouldn't let us vote on it on the floor. I expect that you are going to see legislation moving forward to protect Dreamers.
How soon do you think?
I haven't seen the exact schedule, but this is a priority for Democrats, no question. And not just Dreamers, but an extremely important component there on folks that are designated with temporary protective status. So hundreds of thousands of people that have been here, oftentimes for years, if not decades, that have followed every letter of the law, that now have children here that are U.S. citizens, that have formed businesses, that own homes, that because the president decided to end that program, that puts their own their futures here in the United States in jeopardy as well. Those folks deserve to be protected. Now, I've had a number of conversations with Republican colleagues over the course of that shutdown back in December and January. There has seemed to be an acknowledgement that Dreamers and folks with TPS, temporary protective status, and a smaller subset of individuals who had served in our military that were then also deported, if you can believe it, that there would be strong bipartisan support for some aspect of protection there. What we haven't been able to get to is any sign from the White House as to what it's going to take to move that forward. And that continues to be a moving target. And that's been part of the frustration.
Are you hoping to get to this before the summer?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Do you want to get to the OTR Pop quiz before the summer?
Summer, late fall sounds good.
Good answer.
Why did I know that
answer.
answer was coming? All right, this is time for the OTR Pop quiz, and I'm looking at it for the first time because it was hermetically sealed by our hermetically sealers. All right, time. Yeah, don't read it off the. Oh yeah, go ahead. He's reading the prompter, which is fun. Okay, in the OTR Pop quiz, let's start with Hollywood choice, and the topic is other famous Kennedys. In 1968, this actor won an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor in the movie Cool Hand Luke. Was it Arthur Kennedy? Was it Terrence Kennedy? Was it George Kennedy?
George?
You got it. Okay, well, there you go. You're absolutely right. It was George Kennedy. And for X, he played the chain gang convict called Dragline. All right, for bonus points, who was the star of that movie?
I have no clue.
Oh, yes, you do.
No,
I'm
yes, you
sure
do.
You've seen it.
No.
Yes, you do.
How old do you think I am? No.
The movie's last. Paul Newman.
I should have.
Paul Newman. So you don't get the bonus points, but you're 1 for 1. Question 2. She currently hosts her own program on the Fox Business Network, but the conservative commentator Kennedy got her start on an entertainment-based cable network. Name that network. You have choices. Is it Bravo? Is it MTV? Or is it E? It's MTV. She hosted 120 Minutes and later Alternative Nation in the 90s, and you'll never forget Paul Newman and those blue eyes. I'm telling you, you'll never forget those blue eyes.
Were you allowed to watch MTV growing up?
I watched a little bit of it, not a ton. I wasn't cool enough.
We'll be right back.